Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a question from AppTac, and since it's a bit on the longer side, I'm going to summarize it and say that they're basically asking why is it that oftentimes it seems fans have better ideas or are more creative while also being more consistent with the canon than those that Disney and Lucasfilm actually hire to make Star Wars, which I'll also turn into, or it'll help answer a bonus question of why the expanded universe was or is better than the Disney canon, in my opinion. Okay, so getting right to it, in large part, I believe it comes down to two things. The first being the intent of the creator, while the other is oftentimes just their general knowledge of Star Wars, which we'll get into more a bit later. But kicking it off with the intent thing, I think there are two, or in a sense, three ways to approach making something in the Star Wars universe, or any well-established franchise for that matter. The first is really trying to leave your mark on it, to make something you really want to make or see in that franchise, or to do with that franchise. To do something creative or different with the property in order to maybe get attention for yourself, or so that whatever you made truly stands out from the rest of the Star Wars galaxy or franchise or content, rather than trying to make something that just fits in and just might be for the fans.
Like you did in this movie, how worried are you that you might also piss off people that are?
Can I just say though, a lot of times I would say to Ryan, we got to think about the fans.
Yeah.
And he said, no, we got to think about the story and we got to think about our movie, which
This approach can even go so far as wanting to deconstruct it or to completely reimagine it, which, no, those aren't always bad things. They can be done well, but they do have a tendency to be done poorly and to anger longtime fans who really don't think things need to be changed. Along with this sort of approach, then, there are also those who go a step further, shall we say, and they see something like Star Wars as an opportunity to preach a particular message or agenda that they strongly believe in, to treat Star Wars as a sort of soapbox because they know they have that guaranteed audience. They know a lot of people are going to watch a Star Wars movie or a show pretty much no matter what, or that used to be the case with Star Wars anyway. Either way, they see making something Star Wars as an opportunity to say something of importance to them, or again, to leave their mark on it in order to further their own career, or whatever the case might be. In other words, they see something they can use rather than seeing it as an opportunity to make something that truly is Star Wars, something that fits in with everything that has come before, to make something for Star Wars and for its fans rather than just make something for themselves. Which is then basically the second way of approaching it, to want to create something for the fans, to want to make something that is a part of the larger Star Wars canon, that honors it and enhances it, that looks at that canon and tries to fit in with all of it, no matter how much it might be and no matter how much you might have to play around it, because you want to sort of further Star Wars itself rather than maybe your own career or your goals or your agenda or whatever again it might be. And yes, you can certainly understand someone seeing Star Wars as an amazing opportunity to further a career and still wanting to make great Star Wars. It's not a mutually exclusive thing here. Plus, you can also go too far the other way in the for the fans direction. You can, and oftentimes fans do, let's be real, they make something that feels very fan fiction-y, that includes a bit too much fan service and or relies a little too heavily on the old characters everyone already knows and loves, and it ends up maybe doing almost nothing new or interesting. It's just cool stuff, and that's fine. It can be fun and enjoyable, but also you could argue it doesn't do much for Star Wars itself. Which is why the third option is probably the best, which is somewhere between these two extremes, though I'd err more on the side of trying to fit into Star Wars and do something for it, while yes, also to some degree, like I was saying, you can leave your own mark on it, you can want to further your career, you don't have to be completely selfless to make great Star Wars, ironically enough, and doing something fresh and new from time to time, which doesn't stray too far from what fans want and expect, is perfectly fine and probably needs to be done. I really do think there are some very, very fine lines here that are easily crossed, which is why it can be kind of difficult to make good Star Wars if you don't have the right mindset. Because sometimes there are those who just want to do what they want to do without any real regard to how it affects the larger story of Star Wars or how the fans may react to it. Rian Johnson, I'd say, is an example of this, with him even saying once that, I don't really think in terms of universes or in terms of creating worlds or whatever. That's not that interesting to me. He's also talked about how he really wanted to tell a complete story with Episode 8, that he wasn't all too interested in doing a middle movie of a trilogy, which is fine if that's your personal approach or belief, but it doesn't seem like a great fit for Star Wars, especially when you do have to do the middle movie of a trilogy. Basically, there are those who really don't want to play in the Star Wars sandbox itself. They just want to play with the sand. They want to be able to take the bits and pieces of it that they like because they know people will, again, pay attention and watch, and then shape them and mold those pieces, those clumps of sand, how they want in order to form their own unique vision without having to worry about any boundaries or constraints or limitations, which is what they see the extensive canon as. They see it as stuff that's going to interfere with their ability to tell their story how they want to tell it. They see what others have done before in the same universe as a sort of burden. Whereas, and I'll use myself as an example, I'm someone who has created my fair share of Star Wars fan fiction and shared it here on YouTube, but I see the rest of the canon as an asset in some ways and a kind of challenge in others. It's something that can help guide my story. The work of others before me has given me many wonderful ideas and places and characters and concepts, ones that I can use to create my own Star Wars stories now. And I see that as my chance to then blend all those ingredients from others together in interesting ways and maybe throw in my own little spices here and there. And I see the whole thing as, yeah, kind of a challenge to create something that my fellow fans will enjoy, that honors what came before, and that also is mine in some way at least, to include a bit of my own flavors, but that overall very much does taste like Star Wars. And oftentimes when it comes to the rest of the canon and bringing in creators, especially top talent as they're called, you'll hear someone say of them that they can't be expected to know it all or to come in and have to read a bunch of books and comics, that it's an unrealistic expectation to put upon them. Plus, it just inhibits them from being able to tell a good story if they have to beholden themselves to the work of so many others. And though, no, I don't expect everyone who wants to create a Star Wars story to have read every single book and every comic or played every single game and to know every tiny little detail of the universe, I really don't think it's too much to ask for them to at least try and respect the work of others that came before them, to put a little effort into reading and or doing a bit of research, because it's those that came before them that are allowing them this opportunity now. It's the work of so many other people over the nearly 5 decades Star Wars has existed that is the reason why Star Wars is still a thing today, and thus again why they have the opportunity to work in this universe. But again, many of them who do come in don't want to take the time to read up, and they don't already have the knowledge. They'll certainly say they're huge Star Wars fans and talk about how much they love it, but their definition of a huge fan is someone who just watched the movies several times as a kid, and that's about it. Which is fine. You can love Star Wars after only seeing it once if you want, or you can call yourself a huge fan after just one viewing. I'm not the arbiter of what makes someone a fan or not. And you could certainly argue that Tony Gilroy creating Andor is an example of someone who maybe isn't the biggest Star Wars fan ever, creating something that is actually pretty fantastic. But, and I don't mean this as some sort of backhanded compliment or anything, he deserves a ton of praise and credit. Gilroy deserves a lot of credit for what he did with Andor, but I do think that story just kind of naturally fit into Star Wars, and others around him maybe helped make it look and feel a bit more like Star Wars than perhaps he did. He didn't need extensive Star Wars knowledge. He again created a story that just kind of worked for Star Wars, and others around him gave it a bit more of that Star Wars feel, and together they created an amazing piece of Star Wars content. Whereas if, say, you're writing a book or a novel, or writing just your own Star Wars fan fiction to share online somewhere, and usually when you're writing a book or a short story, whatever it might be, you're more or less doing it all on your own. Yes, you have an editor and all that, you can look stuff up online, but you're going to be very responsible for every little detail in there, with knowing things that maybe you don't necessarily have to know when writing a script, which makes it harder to, shall we say, fake it. You really have to know your stuff to write a Star Wars novel, or people who really love and know Star Wars, and let's be real, they're the ones who read the books in the first place. It's generally the more hardcore fans who read the books, but they're going to be able to spot a fake or someone who doesn't really know Star Wars trying to write Star Wars pretty easily in book form. In other words, summing it all up here, why fans oftentimes have better ideas and why the EU oftentimes gave us better Star Wars stories than the new canon does or the films and shows do, it's because they know Star Wars and they truly care about it, and they come at it with a different attitude than the hotshot writer or director who wants to take Hollywood by storm and sees Star Wars as an opportunity to do that. The EU author, sure, they care about their career, no doubt about it, but they also care a great deal about Star Wars, enough so that they can, again, sit down and actually write a book. They want the best for it. They want to tell the best stories in that galaxy over what might be outright just best for them, or over what they think Star Wars should be all about, because that's very important to them. Instead, what is important to them is honoring it and doing right by it and all the others that came before them. It is a priority, not a burden that inhibits doing everything they want, that there is this massive canon to adhere to. And you can feel that when you read it. I mean, I've read a few not so great EU books in my day, but rarely ever did I feel the intent wasn't there to try to tell a good Star Wars story. That this wasn't a fellow Star Wars fan trying to write a Star Wars story for me, for a fan. Whereas some of the shows and movies, I don't exactly feel the love behind them. In fact, sometimes with something like The Acolyte, for example, I almost feel a bit of contempt for Star Wars, a true dislike for the Jedi, for example, and what many feel they stand for. And though there are those who question the Jedi in the EU or maybe had a different take on them than what I believe Lucas did, I never felt like it came from a place of ill will, like they hated the Jedi and wanted me to understand why I should too. They just maybe had a different interpretation of the same thing that I loved. And again, the intent to create a story that entertained me as a fan to further Star Wars always felt there. Whereas with some of the people they hire, it just isn't. They again either see Star Wars as an opportunity to further a career, or they just see it as a means by which to convey a message that's important to them, or again, it's something about them and not something about the fans who love Star Wars. But anyway, I think that is going to be enough rambling for this time. Your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this topic. Or you can ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do, you start your comment off with "Hey Thor," ask your question. I will try to answer it in a future video. But whatever the case may be, do leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.